you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Foreign Policy Review. We are here with our regular panel, which is me. Time to introduce us for the first time. I'm Ben TOTH from Hungary. We have Billy Bob from the West Coast, CARLO PARCELLI from the belly of the beast in Washington, D.C., and our special guest, first-timer, is WOUTER PEETERS, I think from Belgium, but I think we'd like to know first a little bit about you, if you want to give a little biography, maybe where people can follow you, and go from there.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I think the Foreign Policy Review is about the best spot on the internet that you can find to get your weekly updates, and especially since everything was like in a rapid, with especially military operation, we need to have quick and conclusive info, and I think the Foreign Policy Review is exactly that. Who am I? Well, in short, I would say that since about 10-15 years, I would call myself, or I try to be a knowledge activist. That is a term, a word used by Jan Blommaert, the late Jan Blommaert. And he said it's very important that some people are just trying to keep studying stuff, and that's also activism. So I kind of lean towards that. For the rest, I don't know. So you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're a knowledge activist, I think, based on your name, from Belgium. Is that?
Yes.
Is that cool? So yes. You're in the decaying west of Europe, just like I am. Interesting time to be alive, isn't it?
Yes, I relate to CARLO a little bit, because CARLO, you're from Washington. Yes. I live at like half an hour of a drive from Brussels.
Oh.
So imperial car, colonialist car, very interesting, but also very blinding when you're right into it. For example, when I was in school, I never heard the name Lumumba once. And I was in, pretty good schools. This is stuff that
Belgium.
you just have.
Belgium, they don't even teach you who Patrice Lumumba was. Interesting.
Yes.
Whereas during the fights in Donbass, there was a Lumumba street. I'm not sure at which theater. Maybe it was in Mariupol, but they kept the memory alive,
All right.
So what's it just to spit away from the European belly of the beast, from Brussels?
Yes. Belgium on itself is a very interesting country because it's not powerful, but very complex. We have many layers in politics. And this is why I think some of the European top politicians, so-called top politicians, are selected from Belgium because of the complexity we are forced into. And at the same time, there's always been some kind of crossroads, power gathering going on over here, and it gives a unique perspective, but it's very complicated, and very little people have a clear view here. Sometimes it's better to be outside looking in, and you see much more happening. As I said, from right close up, you don't see, you see a lot of trees, but you don't see the forest. And that's, I think, the difficulty. And in a strange way, the privilege of being in Belgium.
like a fish not knowing it's underwater. That's pretty much
Yes.
being
Yes.
that close, you know. Jyoti Bra, head of the CPGB ML party, talked with Garland Nixon recently, and they said that's the issue with the European or the post-colonial, the central Western left, is they have never actually experienced the whip, the boot on the neck, just like the global South has, and that makes a huge difference now that we are living through history, basically with two massive summits. The first one is Russia-Africa, apparently low attendance, which is 49 out of 54 countries. Massive, massive summit, just a superstar event. And then also Mr. Shoigu from Russia went to the DPRK, the first public high-level meeting of the two places, met with Kim Jong-un and enjoyed some a gala festival, and of course browsed some weapons based on US drones, which are both fascinating. I'm wondering, what do you think about these events on these very stunning anniversaries? DPRK, by the way, which is People's Korea, North Korea, has a 70th anniversary of the Korean Armistice Day, but in their language, it's the day of victory in the Great Fatherland Liberation War. That's when Shoigu arrived, and the Chinese delegation as well. And that was July 26. July 27 was the day of remembrance of the children's victim in the Donbass, which nobody in Europe seems to know about, but the Russians remember very well. The Alley of Angels was covered with flowers. All the embassies of the West in Moscow were protested at with people carrying the portraits of children who died some 10 years ago. Sorry, I just dumped a lot of information that I had freshly in my head.
Can I jump in before?
Yes,
I just wanted to, if I was going to introduce PEETERS, I would just refer to him as somebody who has watched our show since for a while now, but always comments and always has input and is a wealth of information and speaks directly to the content of our program. So he's very well informed. He's been a Facebook friend for a while, and we've just appreciated his commentary, on our programs. So we're very happy he came on. So it's not easy to step out of your comfort zone and get in front of a camera and stuff. So we appreciate that, and I kind of feel cringy for putting him on the spot and making him talk about himself. But he did good. There's so much to talk about, and we really need to encourage this kind of thing that we're doing here and utilizing the tools available to get this information out. So I'm thankful that PEETERS finds us informative and finds us useful, and I'm glad he was happy to step out of his comfort zone and come on. So Ben, a lot of things to discuss. Yeah. You just brought up any number of
I'm
topics.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you for the course correction.
I love the Shoigu, North Korea. I mean, that's great. The U.S. kind of just told China, hey, you better get your dog under control, or we're gonna get it under control for you. So.
And then the Russian
West
defense
lives
minister
in their own reality, So, PEETERS, what about you? So Ben gave us a lot of stuff to discuss. What is the top one that you would like to that's stimulating your gray matter?
Well, probably the fact that we should de-diabolize the DPRK and all the radical, successful left-wing revolutions. And that is something that's very hard to do right over here. I don't know how about you, because you always have to do the disclaimer, these are dictatorships and all that stuff. And then once you go through that, there's no discussion anymore.
You coined a phrase, man. De-diabolize. De-diabolize. Make it less diabolical. I think that's a wonderful phrase for this, because by the way, people should remember, before around the 2010s, the DPRK was just another socialist country. It was like Cuba. There was nothing special about it. That's when it began, this diabolization of the DPRK or People's Korea. Like, people eat rats. They have one train. People get executed by air defense cannons and shit like that, and get eaten by piranhas. So that's when that began. So it's impossible to touch in the West, isn't it? Before saying that's this dictatorial hellhole. Good point on de-diabolizing. I'm trying to practice that word.
I just tried. I'm still working on recognizing my indoctrination. And sometimes you see through, and I have so few people who can openly discuss things. So I'm still a little bit cramped up. I know that I studied a little bit about the Xinjiang so-called genocide. That was one of the first discussions I had that I really, because that's kind of a simple thing. There is no proof. Show me the proof. That's the only thing you have to repeat to people who claim that. And nobody came up with something. Even after 2 months, after 100, 200 Facebook discussions. And then, you figure things out. But the same thing, what Gaddafi did was semi-socialist, and the same thing, diabolization all the way. It's not really an answer to your question, but
no, it's good.
Yeah.
You have to look both at the available information and the sources, because you mentioned the Xinjiang cultural genocide of the Uyghurs. Yeah. And mostly, if you ask for the sources, it went to one place, this radical Christian called Adrian Zenz. Most of the stuff came from his imagination. He's like the Solzhenitsyn to the Soviet Union. That was him to China. Yeah. Just basically all the Arab countries have sent delegations to Xinjiang since then, and they said, sorry, we just don't see evidence of the crimes purported in the Western media. Yeah. Something similar needs to happen, by the way, to the our image of the DPRK color.
And the propaganda is so entertaining. I can't remember her name, but there's this young woman who's been making the rounds actually for years, spouting the most ridiculous propaganda about North Korea.
Yep. Yes.
For example, that when the trains break down, the passengers get out and they push the train.
Now, there's one train.
But you'd think, the American population being sophisticated, and I'm being sarcastic here, would see how absurd that notion is, but they don't. She goes on Joe Rogan's show. She gets, 6 or 7 million views, and people actually believe that stuff. They don't even know the basic physics.
I don't know if Joe Rogan did, but a lot of people do, for sure. But yeah. I mean, Rogan gave a little pushback.
He looked a little skeptical. He did.
But he just nodded along most of the time. That was very
I think he just wanted to fuck her. That's all he wanted to do.
Maybe, because she's got brand new big tits. She was a very nice little Korean lady when she came out, but now she's basically Los Angelesized. Very plastic,
very plastic.
This is a huge problem. I mean, and we talk about this a lot, is the propaganda apparatus and just the way in which it can influence people's minds and indoctrinate them, and how insidious it is, how powerful it is. It's one of the biggest struggles that we have right now is coming up against that. But I think, people are waking up, and I think, again, if we poll, the mainstream media and, who trusts them, it's single digits, just like Congress. And yet, it's the Democrats that think that, the Republicans are lying, and the Republicans think that's the Democrat media that's lying. And they blame the conservative media or the liberal media, depending on what side of the fence. But that whole entire paradigm, I think people are slowly waking up to that. It's, that's not really where it's at. All of it is an ideological construct, and it's entirely detached from objective material reality, which actually guides the policies of the ruling establishment, that divides itself into two wings and gives itself the veneer of a two-party, democracy.
Yeah, but, no matter. Don't forget, your vote counts. Your voice matters.
WOUTER, are you as optimistic as Billy Bob?
I'm increasingly optimistic. Go, Mr. Peters.
Yes,
I'm an old man, so I have a different perspective.
I'm not going to go against the grain since I'm quite optimistic. One thing, I don't know whether it was Michael Parrot who said it. If you think like the system doesn't work, then you're wrong. The system actually does work. If you think that the system doesn't care about you, that you're wrong. The system cares a lot about you. They're really looking into the general population and how they do behave.
Exactly. And it was Parenti, by the way. Yep.
Yeah. Up to this point that they allow near radicals to be published, to speak out. We don't have to go for the total insane people that just spout out all kind of nonsense. I think the most dangerous ones are the ones who appear rational. And at the point, if you ask them a real question, and if you pin them down on this question, they do crazy stuff. They just politely say, "Oh, sorry, I don't have time," and I just move on. And those are the ones that block the way. Those are the kind of friends you can have, and so you don't need enemies. I just wanted to throw that in. But in general, I'm very optimistic. One of the points earlier before the show that we mentioned is the fact that for the first time, I think, and I want to check up on that with you guys, for the first time in history, we have the strongest economy led by a communist party. And if you start analyzing from that point on downwards, things start to make sense. And, we should be wide awake. It's so new to us, I think, that this is happening. Is this as important as the Russian Revolution? I think it's quite on the same level. It's running in the same line. What about? Yeah,
I think you're quite right. I mean, factually, it already is, according to the IMF, the largest economy in the world, one of the most powerful. And they can just show it by turning off some resources like, gallium to here and fish. They're just not going to buy fish from Japan, who have lost like $1 billion ever since that announcement. They can do these things. I think recently we talked about the Strait of Malacca, where the US planned to strangle, China's trade. And they have just announced that they're going to build a canal through northern Thailand. Basically, that's just circumventing. Goodbye. There's no waters anymore in the Malacca Strait. Nothing can be shot off anymore. And they have the Belt and Road Initiative, one of our favorite topics, deep in Africa, deep in, most of Europe, even though, the West is kind of trying to break off. What do you call them? It's not delinking, it's de-risking now. At the same time, in economics, they really are not de-risking. What happens if the Soviet Union were the most powerful country on earth, not the US, like, say, 1960s? What happens today? And what happens 5 years, 10 years from now? I want to get everybody's thoughts on this because it is a whole new paradigm that we're living through.
We'll start with CARLO.
No, you go, Billy Bob.
I mean, I'm optimistic, but really, the future depends on the West, right? How is the West going to respond to its own, displacement and withdrawal from, being the preeminent power? So I'm not sure they've figured out, I'm not sure it's set in stone exactly what the West's plan is to China's ascendancy, to, Russia and Iran, BRICS, the Belt and Road. I mean, all those things, the de-dollarization, I'm not sure the West has made a decision about how to respond to it. I think, it's still up in the air. And I mean, it could go any number of ways. I mean, they could think that, because they've overextended themselves and the global financial structure is impossible to maintain and prop up as is, that a big reset with a global conventional war is necessary. And then at the end of that, they'll just do their best to, cobble something else together and they'll start from scratch again, maybe with a little bit less power and influence than they currently have now. I mean, I think that's, what some people are advising who are, in positions of power and influence. What they should do is, become communist. And by becoming communist, what I mean is, they should start thinking about the best interests of humanity, and they should start working with other societies in advancing, the interests of humanity, and not just the interests of those who have all the wealth and power and want to maintain their wealth and power. But this is like asking, a fish not to live in water, and the capitalist class just
it's all they know. Yeah.
They're not, they can't. If one of them says, "Hey, let's do this," he's going to get attacked. I mean, we've seen what they did to Trump. We've seen what they did to JFK. When the capitalist class gets out of line and goes against the class interest, they get taken care of. So in a sense, you have two immovable forces. With China, I see China like a steamroller, and they're just overcoming. It's set in motion, and it's overcoming any kinds of obstacles that are set up to keep it from keep it from progressing. And so they do it domestically. Domestic problems come up. They come up with ingenious, pragmatic ways of overcoming those problems. And it's the same with foreign policy on the international stage. You just mentioned, this canal they're going to build in Thailand. It's going to be solving one of the problems that imperialism hoped to use against it. It's just a steamroller, and there's literally nothing the West can do. They're not smart enough. They're incapable of containing China. But at the same time, the West is its own force for evil, moving forward, and there's not really much that anybody can do to stop it. They really have to have a collective decision, and I don't know if that's going to happen. But I'm optimistic. Either way, the result is going to be the same. The West is going to decline, and China and humanity is going to be better for the West's decline.
I think there was some jumps in there, and I want to respond, but go CARLO first.
I find Billy Bob's optimism infectious. And I remember back with Iran-Contra, I was working with the Christic Institute. And
good infectious or bad infectious?
I'll get to that. And I was very optimistic. And I wrote a letter to the Washington Post, which they published. And I said, the Post is missing out on one of the greatest changes in U.S. foreign policy in my or anybody else's lifetime, and nothing happened. They basically killed it, squashed it. And we were talking about this coup in Niger, which has taken place, and as we speak, and we have talked about the Belt and Road Initiative that wants to cross the Horn of Africa to Eastern Africa, and Niger was really the last obstacle, because President Bazoum was so pro U.S., so pro French,
yes,
that he himself was in the way of that project, and now the small contingent of his palace guard have taken him down, or at least trying to take him down. Even though he claims the military and the military and the guard,
National Guard, maybe?
National Guard have sided with Bazoum. But then another thing is, no one came to Bazoum's defense. It was it couldn't have been more than, look at people waiting to buy hot dogs at a hot dog stand. That's how big the crowds were that were protesting the coup. So it's a way we have to see how it pans out. But the U.S. seems to be back on its heels in a lot of ways, because this coup, to my mind, resembles the kind of coup the CIA always used to run, whether it's well thought out and well planned or not. But it does seem like that the U.S. and its European allies are back on their heels in this regard, and in other places around the world they're going to. I mean, the way the Kenyan president Ruti, I think his name is, or the way the South African officials have just laid out their disgust with the way they've been treated, and they're not going to be treated like that any longer. So, and Lula and South America and certainly Central America, it's going on and on and on. And I think this might be, and Billy Bob, I say this is some trepidation because I've been wrong several times about this, but I think this is the big one.
I'm with you there, and that was very interesting. We get positivity from CARLO, who is our resident downer. I think I can say that usually when it comes to looking at things optimistically. I wanted to make some further points as well, but I don't know if MUTIU is here because in 1 minute, maybe we have to go to a break. Maybe this is a good time to do it and we can pick up from there. Hearing from WOUTER next. Or maybe...
We usually wait for the half-hour mark. We're about 4 minutes from the half-hour mark, but we can definitely go to break if available. Otherwise,
I forgot that we started late. Okay, a couple of more points on that. The bubble is bursting, and then on to you, WOUTER. Just a week ago, the Europeans had this summit with the Latin American nations, and they were just an absolute minority when it came to Russia and the world, and nobody went along with what they were saying. Now the African summit, where they say low attendance to Putin's goals, is 49 out of the 54 countries are present, which is enormous. You talked about Niger. Also, the president of Mali is there, and he just 2 days ago removed French as an official language. Goodbye. It's the end of basically what was the decolonial struggle after World War II. Wasn't really successful, was it? But Russia was there to help, and Russia is here to finish the job. That's my impression. Billy Bob, I think you jumped a little bit from the Communist Party, the CPC of China, so ideology to actual, brick and mortar economics. I don't think, China is a socialist country, under development, as they would say. They don't export the revolution. They don't export their way of thinking. But they're a good example. You don't even have to call it socialist, of planning ahead, 5-year plans, achieving what was only dreamed of in 1949 when the Chinese people rose up. I think that will have implications across the world. And as a final point, I would like to add that Hungary was one of the first, again, among the little Western European puppets, to see the trend first. Because the first day, which was yesterday, of this Africa-Russia summit, was a little conversation between President Putin and al-Sisi of Egypt, which has its financial troubles. But immediately it was announced that in the Suez Canal area, there would be a Russian industrial zone meant to service Africa. And Vladimir Putin said Africa can not only feed itself, but export foodstuffs. And we were the first, with President Sisi today, Siarto said, we signed a deal to create a railway vehicle production line in Egypt meant to service Africa. We are the ones to see the writing on the wall. Africa is out from under the yoke. It will finally rise. We want to be a part of that rise. That would be my points to add to what you said. But let's go back to our guest, WOUTER.
I just wrote a couple of things down. The fact that we need to be cautious with our optimism and that we may struggle with it because there's not a lot of signs for real cautiousness. It's just because the situation is so new. We've been wrong about stuff, I think, all of us, in our optimism and sometimes, in our pessimism as well. That we don't see opportunities and we don't see, lights shimmering through the foliage because we're not used to it. I wanted to react on Billy Bob. You started with everything is about the West and what the West is going to do, but then we kind of moved around that. I would try to say, does it? Well, that's good. I mean, that's a proof of a flexible mind. Does the West really still matters? Apart from, as you mentioned, Billy Bob, a global conventional war with whatever kind of massive destruction, does it really matter? And I would throw on top of that, I think if China wants tomorrow or next week or next month to have the dollar being in crumbles, it can do that. It can install some panic here and there, and then just gives a couple, and it's just sliding down the slippery hill that it's already on, and it's built for itself. China is not doing that, and that is, I think, a proof of responsibility. No one wins if an empire in decline is injured very heavily. The empire in decline, the best way, and I think it was a couple of shows ago, should not be aware of its own decline until it's there and nothing can be done about it anymore. And just let them believe that they still can do everything like in the old days
Which they still do
So,
to a large extent, don't they? They still believe they can dictate everything. They do believe that.
yeah. But this is the thing that I read a couple of years ago, that China is going for a soft landing for the United States hegemony.
That's a great
It's very
point.
important.
Peter. Great point. They're managing it. It's a decline. They're trying to manage it with the least fallout, the least amount of negative externalities that are going to result to protect societies, to protect the developing world that's always going to get hit worse in a global financial crisis. So you're exactly right. I mean, that's a great point. I totally agree with that. It's about managing this very unprecedented time, which, you know, only comes around every few centuries.
Friend of the show, Regis Tremblay, said the same. Managing this decline is the biggest job for China.
Yeah. Maybe the only comparison or analogy that we can find is when feudalism was replaced by capitalism, and feudalism, I think in Russia, was not really replaced by capitalism. There was a little bit of capitalism, but it went socialist, without that capitalist phase.
They jumped. So did we in Hungary. Yep.
Oh, yeah. But, the feudalists, last show it was mentioned, qu'ils mangent les brioches, that they eat cake. This mentality of then they'll do whatever they do. We're in power, and the power is self-sustaining, and we don't have to be smart, except from a smart dog like Kissinger trying to, on his last legs, do something, of whatever. The rest is, too full of themselves to really.
So you're speaking of the limitations associated with capitalism, and when you have a government that's only concerned about benefiting, maintaining the preeminence of a small group of wealthy and powerful people, like when that's their whole objective is to maintain power with these wealthy, powerful people, and they see a better government that's going to, do more than just that. A better government, like a socialist government, that's going to actually care about improving the quality of life for the vast majority. That's a threat to their interests. But there's just severe limitations associated with a governance of that kind. That's why socialism is far superior, because it's not just constrained by maximizing profit for people who are already obscenely wealthy. But I don't know. Was that what you were saying? Because that's what I took from what you were saying. But if you were making a different point, you can clarify. Or CARLO can jump in.
Don't we have to go to a break, though?
I think if MUTIU's around, then let's go for this break. Get back to you after that.
Let's take a break.
Yeah.
That was nice. He didn't cut me off.
Well,
break time.
Come on.
We should carry on then.
Yeah, we can
carry on.
I had things to say. I think a lot of the truisms you just said were inherent in what WOUTER was saying, but maybe the question is, do they really have that force, the divine right?
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted, and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your products and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the website they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our news site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
Apologies to the viewers. We just never quite get that break time perfectly right. So I was just summarizing that perhaps, you know, the divine right of kings, it was in Europe and it's going to last forever. And suddenly the world around them was changed so drastically that it no longer existed. I'm wondering if the West really is relevant in today's world that much. Does it actually have that force, that power, you know? Because two things happened at these two summits. Both of them had massive arms expos and bonanzas to buy Russian arms, which have demonstrated their superiority in Ukraine. I mean, you just can't miss the burning Western NATO material there. And people think this doesn't have an effect. It has a massive effect. So it usually, the West had massive diplomatic power. It can just sanction you. It can just threaten you with all kinds of economic crap or with weapons. Once taken off the table, the second is taken off the table via de-dollarization. I'm wondering if we are more advanced, more forward in this process than we think we are. And with that, I guess I'm on the more optimistic side. WOUTER, did I get part of that right, of what you were saying?
When you were explaining this, I was thinking about Greece, the Greek crisis, and how cheap it would have been for Brussels to, you know, bail out or to help the Greek people with their financial trouble. This costed much more. The fact that Brexit was bad on the international stage and all that, it doesn't matter how much it costs. They're not really being, in fact, good capitalists. They're more like imperialists. Greece had to serve as an example of don't do this, don't mess with anything in Brussels. And they were quite successful in not letting the Brexit happen, because I think if there would be a hard rupture, and this would be a precedent, the unity or the so-called halfway unity that you have in the European Union would be nothing at all. We see this in the Ukrainian conflict as well. They don't line up properly. This is like a halfway United States of Europe, and we want to be individualists as well, which of course lines up very well with individualism and capitalism. There's no collectivist spirit. Where would this class of people, lots of them are from our generations that lead Brussels, where would they have learned collectivism?
Yeah,
and then I think,
Go on.
And then I think, Ben, because you had, maybe that's for another time or something, you've had a different upbringing, I think. And for me, that's very interesting to know what it was like to grow up in a socialist country. And but that's another thing.
Yeah, I watched Douglas McGregor talk to someone again, and everything he talks about before 1990s and on the other side of the Iron Curtain when I was is bullshit. I absolutely know that for a fact because I've seen it. I've talked with the people, my grandmas, my babushkas here, who saw the 50s, the 60s here. So it's the absolute opposite. So I didn't want to go in a misdirection, but what you mentioned, the Greek crisis, we're talking about today of Rhodos burning and they wanting Russians to help with putting out the fires, but they just don't have the courage to ask them. You are talking about the traitors in Syriza who failed to exit the EU and have their own currency. And yes, that would have been a domino effect way earlier, I think, than today. Yes. 3 out of this week's, last week's 7 days, Huxit, the Hungarian exit, was trending. And our former central banker said in just a year ago, the concept of exiting the EU was maybe 10%, absolutely low. Well, now it could be a solution to a lot of our problems. That's happening here too, with a lot of bad domestic stuff that I don't want to minimize. On the international arena, we are finally acting like a sane little country. My tidied up responses to that, but yeah.
that may be that may bring us to a next point on a more pessimist note. If the Atlanticist imperialist core is gonna lash out again, where will that land? That misery, that destabilizing misery, where would that land? Would it be Serbia, Hungary?
Would it be Iran? Would it be what do you call I am blanking on the island of Taiwan. Yeah. Where will it be?
So for cautiousness, I think we should keep at least half an eye open for, considering Ukraine is not the last proxy.
Absolutely not.
Those people, they never sleep. I'm here, and they're working 24/7 to spread mayhem around the world.
True, Carlo.
Position of power.
But as a counterweight, as I mentioned, the two massive arms expos in Russia and the DPRK. Russia has, I think, this time not pissed on the drones, but released flares on them twice this week over Syria. So they have proven to the world that this didn't happen before, that there is an antidote to those super Wunderwaffen, those wonder weapons from the West. And they are actually shown to be pretty bad, because their GPS system is just jammed by electronic warfare, and they are proven to be pretty useless. And the arms people of the world are paying attention.
And those inadequacies are product of the way weapons are integrated into the capitalist system.
Very true. Yeah.
So,
the military-industrial complexes of Russia and the US couldn't be more different. Go, Billy.
We've hit on a few times, but somebody just made another great point, saying Ukraine is not the last proxy, because of course they're like they're one of the first proxies. There's been ISIS and Al Qaeda were also proxies, but as far as a nation state goes, just to sacrifice itself on the altar of imperialism, they're the first. But my point to that would be, I think a lot of people are seeing that that's not a good idea. And it's hard to think that there's capitalists around the world in Japan or South Korea saying, oh, I want to be the next Ukraine. Me, pick me. It's going to be a hard sell. And it's not going to be easy to get other proxies going forward. And I think that's good. And it gives us more reasons for pessimism. Optimism.
There was a huge change of the wind in Mysl Polska, one of the Polish big newspapers, who were absolutely, we are the next Zelensky land, like starting to criticize everything Zelensky, starting to criticize Ukraine. I think they see this writing on the wall. That maybe we don't want to be next.
That are stupid enough to line up, but the Polish jokes. I'm part Polish. My grandfather had a sticker that says "Kiss me, I'm Polish," and he knew all the Polak jokes. I don't ever know where those actually came from, but I don't think they're as stupid anymore as like the Latvians, for instance, because I think some of those Baltics might actually raise their hand and say pick me, but hopefully Poland's no longer dumb enough to do that.
Yeah, and let's just add, we are talking about the political leadership of Poland and the Baltics. I know Polish people personally.
That's
Polish
what I mean.
people who are Z people, absolutely with Russia to the last. So it's not representative.
They're marginalized and not allowed to.
The same thing with Ukraine. This week I watched a French show. Michel Collomb from Investigation, a very interesting journalist, was on a debate, and one of the things was, the Ukrainian people, and then, you point out that there's people who volunteer for the army, people who flee for Russia, people who just are pinned down, don't want to talk about it. Political parties are for a long time already not representing the will of the people. But that's class analysis. It's always upper class. It's always
true. It's just so opaque, don't you see? It's not transparent. We don't know how many people are just hiding in their living rooms, not wanting to go to the shops because they'll be drafted in and sent to the front. We don't know if that's the majority. It may as well be. We don't know. We just see the very visible, very loud NATO type Ukraine flag idiots.
Yeah.
And certainly the Taiwanese also the people themselves have a great deal of skepticism about becoming the next sacrificial lamb to the altar of Western capitalism.
Garland Nixon's tweet heard around the world, maybe unwittingly, played a huge role in that. Official organs of Taiwan picked that up, saying, hey, they really want to destroy TSMC. They really want to bomb our facilities. Maybe we're not the best. We don't want to be allies with this kind of crap.
Yes, images, too, of Ukraine are great selling points for let's not do this.
And that's why the Brits... Sorry, go. Just a minor point. The Brits...
Go ahead.
The British also sent tanks, among the Leopards, which are burning en masse. They sent the Challenger 2s, who the PR is the best tank in the world, absolutely fantastic. And they had direct orders. You cannot send them to the front. We cannot have this kind of imagery about it. Just keep them in the back somewhere. Interesting.
But Carlo, you pointed out the quality of the products that a capitalist system produces. It has to break down. It has to be cheap. It has to be looking the real stuff, but not being the real stuff. Plant obsolescence. The more maintenance, the better, because that brings a lot of money, after sales. And on a battlefield, you cannot do that. Yeah. In a regular economy, you have time to, package it up and then make it beautiful again and throw 1,000 commercials at it, and that's what they try to do.
That's the point.
The battlefield, in the beginning of the year of last year, I saw a very interesting cartoon. There was two Russian soldiers walking in Washington or New York, I think New York, and one said to the other, "I think we're losing the soft power war." Of course, it's an extrapolation; it's exaggerated. But when it comes down to it, life is materialist and not soft power. And
there's the real world.
Right.
That's a crucial point you made.
There is a level of delusion. What you're talking about is right in their textbooks. It's called planned obsolescence. And I knew Pierre Spray, who worked on the F-35, was one of the key engineers of the F-35, and then turned against it because it became a boondoggle. And it just infuriated him that he could not get through to these people that U.S. taxpayers were paying enormous amounts of money for a plane that is inoperable. And now you occasionally hear beyond F-16s that people want to purchase, other countries want to purchase F-35s.
I don't know why.
It's totally absurd.
Yeah,
they never fly.
Every fortnight, I've seen something of an accident on the runway or a bird strike or something with that piece of crap. But a crucial point that WOUTER made, and I love it, is they're supposed to look on a PowerPoint presentation, look great there, look great in a movie. The Die Hard movie had F-35s, and that's it. It's at an expo for selling, not really perform well on a real battlefield, and not be sturdy and something that is maintained easily even during mud and horrible. That's still Russia. Russia experienced the Second World War more than anybody else. They learned these lessons. The US has this, media power, but also a military industry that looks great in the media. I think that's a beautiful point made. And
education, I don't know, Carlo, Billy, about the education system in the US. I mean, one of the things that we in Western Europe criticize, we don't criticize the US in general too much, but the education system and the healthcare system, that's not as good as ours. But we don't look at Russia and see maybe theirs is better than ours. Anyway,
great point.
If you don't get engineers, you cannot do a lot, I think.
I'll respond to that, but I think Billy Bob wanted to too.
Well, I was going to point out China leads the world in education. Like they have more STEM graduates than Europe, US, Turkey combined, like by a factor of 4 or something crazy and ridiculous. But they've really developed their education system as far as research papers written. Every single metric, they're number one. All the standardized testing, they're number one. Even the US champion math team is from China.
I tweeted that when I saw the math team and their name was young, like I think maybe primary education math, and it was Mr. Zhao, Mrs. Liu, Mrs. something like that. Was congratulations to you. Second point I wanted to make, yes, China is the powerhouse, but we talked about the DPRK, Korea, under sanctions for I don't know how many decades. When that war ended 70 years ago, most of the arable land, the industrial sector, just like, right now is in Donbass, that was in the south. That was in the well-developed, pushing money in. The north was mostly mountainous land, not very good for anything. Yet, you believe the Yamni Park propaganda. On the other hand, they have a working ballistic missile and nuclear industry. Do you know what kind of talent, what kind of engineering know-how, what kind of electronics chain of industry you need to achieve something like that? That should pop the illusion immediately in anyone's head about education. And yeah, I just want to say to WOUTER Peters on Europe, you're right. That's something we still have a little bit better than America, which is education and healthcare. But damn if it's not been going down and down and down for 30 years.
Yeah.
And what we learned from the second Gulf War is that the military-industrial complex, like Halliburton, just steals the money. There was a brief article about Stingers being sent to Ukraine, and the U.S. taxpayers were being charged 7 times what the value of the Stinger missiles were.
There was a general that talked about that going back to World War I, but everybody knows what I'm talking about with that.
And then they can't trace it, can't find it, shows up on black markets. And also, how many times, Carlo, you know this best, has the Pentagon audited itself and succeeded and showed a positive report card?
Well, they had a $21 trillion shortfall last time over a 20-year period.
It must be under the rug somewhere. I don't know. It's just a little change.
$21 trillion. Oh my God! I invite you all to come down here, and I'll drive you around to the Shishi neighborhoods of Washington, D.C.
So, in defense of the ruling class, it is not easy. What they do is not easy, and there's no way they can do it transparently. I mean, to run an empire that is predicated on benefiting just a tiny minority of people, it's difficult. So you cut them some slack. Don't expect them to be able to account for what they do, and when they can't, you just understand why. But
it's better because when they speak, they freeze. I don't know if you guys have already seen that video of Mitch McConnell, the, 80-something-year-old representative who just froze in the middle of the sentence. Nothing happened.
I saw a reference to it, and I meant to watch it, but I haven't seen the clip yet.
People said,
he had to be carried off in a stretcher or something. He's good.
Yeah, and compared to George Soros, he's still young, but it's a gerontocratic public.
Compared to Kissinger, everybody's young.
That's true. That is even truer. Yeah. But going back for a second to the media machine, if you're weak and you can't really win diplomatic battles or real battles, that's when you need a media machine. That's when people need, like Pavlov's dog, they need to react to the DPRK as bloodthirsty dictatorship. Vladimir Putin, warmonger, wants to starve the world and kill everybody. Give me another one. Xi Jinping, dictator. Iran, ayatollahs with nukes. That's how people are supposed to respond. And the moment they challenge that,
Hitler. Nasser was Hitler. The guy Noriega was Hitler. Gaddafi was Hitler.
Proud to say Orban was at some point Europe's Hitler as well.
Some are just Mussolini, though. We have to be fair about this.
Yeah, they're B-level, B-level players.
Absurd people. Yeah, but believe me, I read the comment sections of a lot of these chat lists that I've been thrown off of permanently, and people swallow that crap.
They hook, line, and sinker. They do.
They're idiots.
So I was. It's interesting to see. Speaking of Nasser being a Hitler on the Nile, Egypt. I was, because Al-Sisi, he's basically a U.S. puppet. I mean, we installed him because we didn't like the Arab Spring, how it turned out in Egypt, and he's, the military runs that country, and the military is backed by the U.S. So it's interesting that they're developing a measure of independence, and I'm a little surprised to see that. And again, it's all going in line with the major thrust of everything we're seeing, which is just a weakening of imperialism.
Yeah, erstwhile allies like Saudi Arabia have just turned the other way. Yeah. I never thought that could happen in a million years, but it's happening.
Peters, last 5 minutes. We've been monopolizing everything. Okay, last 5 minutes.
No. Just one thing when I'm in discussion with people on Facebook, because that's my main means of communication and learning from other people. There's a very good tool to use when you're looking at the Crimean referendum, and that is that Gallup, the research organization, US-based polling.
Gallup, yeah.
Yes.
They had after the referendum in 2014, 15, I don't know exactly. They polled people and they asked, do you think the result, the 90% in favor of joining the RF, does it line up with what you see around you? So they didn't really ask, what did you vote, but do you have the impression that it's like correct? And about the same number of people, more than 80% said yes. And this is Gallup. So they did that, but they hide it really well.
I've never heard of that poll.
You have to go to the second page. Yeah.
Yeah, the 29th page, to be exactly. I've used it all over and over again and no one in discussion really looks into that and changes his or her mind. No one. This is.
I think.
See, you're back to your pessimism. Now you're sounding like CARLO. Like CARLO.
No, that's media analysis, and I think it's wonderful. I picked up on something like US big anti-ship missiles being transferred to either South Korea or Taiwan, and you had to read the article to the very end to say, well, yeah, it's going to be in 2032. That's when the deal is going to conclude. You just read the headlines, you got no idea what's happening now. And by the way, shout out to Joe, a real life friend of mine, avid watcher of the show. Yes, the counteroffensive is failing, I think, in the Bakhmut, which is now Artyomovsk area, but no time for that today. We had a lot of very stimulating topics, I think.
So was Joe's last name Toth?
Yes, but we're not related. We're just from primary school mates. Yeah.
What a coincidence, because I would have assumed that was your relative and you called him your friend, but okay.
No, it's like Smith. We are unrelated. We're just primary school mates.
Peters, this was really good. It went as good as I had hoped. We will definitely have you back. We appreciate your perspective and you're enjoying us and benefiting from us.
Absolutely.
And we definitely benefited from your commentary today.
I hope you had a good time too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't have any nerves anymore. It's like talking among friends and I kind of expected that because, collectivist spirits do that.
It goes away fast.
Thanks.
I remember my first time here.
Thanks for appearing. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you to everybody who's been watching. Please drop a like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And I guess we'll see you on Tuesday on the midweek episode, which is Pushback, and next Thursday on Foreign Policy Review.
Blowback. What are we doing? We're exposing imperial decline on Blowback on Tuesdays. I found out there's another podcast named Blowback that's way more popular than ours, but ours is probably better.
Yeah.
But MUTIU, I don't know. We're about a minute and a half early, but
I always forgot we started late.
Whenever the producer is ready, but Any other thoughts so we don't sit uncomfortably? Oh, Slug the Pug. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm bringing up Slug the Pug because she's being uncomfortably fidgety. So basically, this is how we're going to say goodbye. Concluding thoughts. Maybe we should go CARLO, Billy Bob, and WOUTER.
Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Well, hey, thanks for staying along.
Yeah, we can chat.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer. This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with